its new look front bench. I'm Isobel Roe, live from the lands of the Ngunnawal people. Welcome to Afternoon Briefing. David Littleproud holds on to leadership of the Nationals, the first step in the coalition's rebuild after a stunning election loss. He defeated Senator Matt Canavan to retain the top job, but will pressure from within the Nationals to ditch net zero have an impact? We ask Nationals MP Darren Chester later this hour. The PM unveils his refreshed cabinet with a promotion for Australia's first female Muslim MP, Anne Ali, and a new portfolio for former Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek. Anthony Albanese opting not to make a captain's call to save MP Ed Husic after he was dumped from the cabinet by his faction. So who now holds the balance of power within the Labor ranks? We're joined shortly by the ABC's Jacob Greber. And a ceasefire in name only as Australia calls for de-escalation between India and Pakistan. Later this hour, we talk to Indian High Commissioner to Australia, Gopal Bagle, in an exclusive interview. The Prime Minister has revealed his new look front bench following Labor's win at the recent election. Anne Ali has been promoted to Cabinet as Minister for Small Business, International Development and Multicultural Affairs. Senator Tim Ayres becomes Minister for Science, Industry and Innovation after Ed Husic was sensationally dropped from that position. Michelle Rowland takes over the Attorney General role from Mark Dreyfus. And Tanya Plibersek becomes the Minister for Social Services, with Murray Watt replacing her as the new Environment Minister, a move Anthony Albanese refused to be drawn to comment on.
I've changed a range of portfolios around. I've got people who are, I think, in the best positions, and that's across the board. There's been, I think, of the Cabinet, there's been multiple changes made. That's what happens. And just as there are new members entering the Cabinet, there were new members last year as well.
As Labor parades its new look cabinet, the Nationals have been making leadership decisions of their own, with Senator Matt Canavan throwing his akubra in the ring for the top job against current leader David Littleproud. And not long ago, as you saw, David Littleproud emerged from the party room victorious, voted in by his colleagues for a second innings. By this time tomorrow, there'll also be a new leader of the Liberal Party and a new deputy. It's a week of change, and to unpack the day, I'm joined by the ABC's Chief Digital Correspondent, Jacob Greber. Thanks for coming in. We might start with the Nationals, as we've just heard from David Littleproud there. An unsurprising result, really, in the grand scheme of things. What sort of a leader is David Littleproud? What does this mean for the party?
Look, you could see it on his face, I think, a little bit. This has not been the way he wanted this to play out. He wanted to make his performance in the election that we've just seen a positive thing. He talks of it being a successful election, having a challenge like this to his leadership. And of course, what we don't know, because of the rules of the National Party, we don't know how close Matt Canavan got to knocking David Littleproud off. But either way, it sends a message that there are people stalking him inside the party. We don't know how close they get. That might not come out, but it is a blow for Littleproud to have to go through that process. And you can see him trying to reassert his sort of authority over the movement, talking about it being about where they go forward now and how they take the fight up to Labor with whatever appears from the Liberal Party in the next 24 hours. But a challenging situation for him. He's got through, he's still the leader, and that's where he's at now.
He did look a little bit rattled, you're right. How much of a challenge did Canavan present? What sort of sentiment is there in the National Party for a shift there?
Look, there is a significant group within that party room. Remember, it's 20 people strong at the moment. Goes down to 19 when they lose one of the senators from New South Wales. So you can easily come up with 5, maybe 6, maybe 1 or 2 more who are of the view that it's time to aggressively move away from net zero, which would go against current National Party policy, which is to get to net zero by 2050. So there is a strong group. How powerful they are overall, they obviously didn't prevail because Canavan is back off into the wilderness, but there is a group that really does want to move hard on this. And you could see that with the way he was dealing with those questions around net zero.
Yeah, so what does this mean for their position on this policy?
Well, it looks to me like they're still very actively debating it. That's certainly what I'm hearing from sources in the National Party. There are others who you might have thought were on board who are pointing out things like, for instance, Tony Blair in Britain saying that net zero isn't up to scratch and needs to be rethought. They're all pointing to comments by Peter Beattie this morning in the Courier Mail saying we've kind of blown it with the heavy focus on renewables. So they're all leaping onto those remarks as though to say it's time to rethink this. The nuclear policy remains on the books despite the very clear verdict of voters that they weren't interested in that. So watch that space. Very much an active area for the National Party.
And I know we don't know who voted what, but we saw Bridget McKenzie walking in with Matt Canavan. I don't know, not much happens by mistake when the cameras are rolling. Do you think that that means that she voted for him?
It's sort of a delicious concept when you then see her moments later behind David Littleproud. She may or may not reveal the way she voted. I suspect not. That's the way those rules operate in the National Party. They can have it out, but then it's incognito, as it were. She plays a very powerful role. She is now the leader of the National Party in the Senate and will be relied on very heavily for the coalition to rebuild.
We'll turn to the Labor Ministry because we have a new front bench today, but sort of a bigger shake-up than what was expected. Murray Watt has gone to the Environment Minister role. How significant is that?
That looks like a real statement of intent by the Prime Minister to put Murray Watt into that position. Murray Watt has tended to be successful at everything that he's had thrown at him. He was the Emergency Services Minister during the floods ahead of the 22 election, made his name then in the years after that. He was also given the very sensitive for the Labor Party industrial relations portfolio when they were turfing out the CFMEU, which was no small matter for the Labor Party. And now this responsibility for really getting the nature positive laws through. These laws have been a millstone around the neck of the government. They took that to the 22 election, struggled to get an agreement across miners and environmental groups. That fell apart at the end of last year famously, and also in February when we had that brief sitting period. And the Prime Minister has repeatedly said in the last few weeks that he wants to get a deal done there. And the key part, this is why he's picked Murray Watt. Murray Watt comes from the resources state of Queensland. I think it's fair to say he's quite a pragmatist. He has to thread the needle, get business on side, particularly the miners, and keep Roger Cook in WA happy.
No small task. We might go through some of the others. Michelle Rowland to Attorney General, as we talked about. Andrew Charlton's been promoted to Assistant Minister. There's some other promotions as well for Tim Ayres to replace Ed Husic. Is that significant? That's
very significant. Tim Ayres is very close to the Prime Minister, factionally speaking, has been one of his staunch defenders over the last few years, particularly when the Prime Minister was struggling in the polls. Tim Ayres was one of what I guess you'd call his Praetorian Guard. He's been rewarded. It's a big promotion for him. The industry portfolio is really the one portfolio that you would have to say is where Labor hopes to drive economic growth, hopes to drive living standards growth. So super important portfolio. He's going to have to get money out the door to keep a lot of that backbench happy. And by what I mean there is money that's set aside, future made in Australia money, reconstruction fund money. Very much one of the criticisms was that there was not enough urgency in the first term about delivering that sort of benefit to workers, and so Tim Ayres, that's his number one job.
And just lastly, before you go, just briefly, the Home Affairs portfolio, Labor took ASIO and AFP out, they're putting it back in. Is that significant? That
is quite significant. It's actually an admission that they made a mistake in a sense. The Prime Minister alluding to why they are now reversing course, putting ASIO back, it seems, with Tony Burke, the Home Affairs Minister, and he talked of communications failures during that caravan incident, the alleged plot to attack Jewish communities with a caravan. That turned out to be other things as well, and ASIO was in the middle of that, and there is a feeling, is my understanding, that Tony Burke would like to have greater line of sight on that, and so hence it looks like the shift for ASIO back to Home Affairs.
Thank you very much for your time, Jacob.
Cheers.
Well, while Senator Matt Canavan was unsuccessful in his bid to become the Nationals leader, he was outspoken on what the coalition needs to be going forward with earlier today. He spoke about his concerns with the party's net zero by 2050 emissions policy.
We've got this binding net zero target, which means we effectively subjugate every other priority in our country to lower emissions. And that is why our power prices are going through the roof. That's why everything in your shops is costing way more than you ever thought it would. And I just think we should run our energy system to reduce power prices first, not reduce emissions. We should try to reduce carbon emissions. I'm not saying we shouldn't. But the obsessive goal of reducing carbon emissions at the cost of anything else is causing enormous pain for average Australians.
Well, joining us now, fresh from the party room, is Nationals MP Darren Chester. Welcome to the program.
Great to be with you.
Are you happy with the result of David Littleproud remaining leader?
Well, I am happy because I think it was a vote for certainty and continuity and a recognition that the Nationals in this last campaign, although we were part of a disappointing result for the entire coalition, but the Nationals performed quite well. We managed to hold all of our 15 seats. We transitioned 3 seats to new members. Those 3 new members are in the House today, voting as part of the process. So I think there was a continuity there, a certainty, and a recognition that the Nats are pretty much on the right track, but there's still more work to be done.
David Littleproud looked a little bit rattled, and we just heard from Jacob then that obviously there was a challenge. It wasn't necessarily something he wanted. Does it concern you that there is now, I guess, a group of people within the party who would have preferred Matt Canavan?
Well, not at all. This is quite a normal process in our room. What happens is at the end or at the start of every new parliament, all chairs are considered empty and vacant. And so that was the right time for people to put their hand up for a leadership role. Matt spoke very well in the room, so did David. We were spoiled for choices in that regard, but on the basis that there really was no case for change given our result in the election and given David's performance over the past 3 years, I'm happy that David is continuing his role. And I'm also happy that Matt will continue to play an important role in our party, particularly in Queensland, where he has, a very strong following and is outspoken on a range of issues, that Matt has a senior role to play for the Nationals going into the future as well.
I know that the whip there wasn't willing to give away votes. Are you going to give away anything about who voted where?
Well, the great thing about a secret ballot is it's actually secret. I don't know the result, so I'd be making it up if I told you a number.
Right, sure. Policy-wise, obviously this is, I guess, a bit more of the same if we're continuing with David Littleproud, but there is this issue of net zero by 2050. Do you think it's a good idea to stick with that?
Well, you're saying, Isobel, more of the same as if nothing ever changed in politics, which is not true. What will occur now is we'll review our election performance. We'll look at the policies that we think are worth continuing with and the ones that we think perhaps haven't stood the test of the election of the Australian people. So we've got some work to do. We know we've got some work to do. I mean, we lost the election badly. We have to look at our policies, work out what is the best way to take Australia forward. I live in an electorate which has had 100 years of energy production. There are people in that community who are very energy literate. They understand you need to have reliability, affordability, but you also need to be part of the global challenge to reduce emissions. People in my community voted overwhelmingly for me at the election, so I take my guide from them largely that they think we're on the right track in that regard. But there's no question, Isobel, we've got a lot of work to do. We're a long way behind now after one electoral cycle. I don't think we're beaten. I don't think it's beyond hope for us. We need to actually look very carefully at our policies and make sure we take a credible position forward to the Australian people in 3 years' time.
What do you think, though, about net zero by 2050?
Well, I think it's something that the room, the National Party room, has to discuss. It's not something I'm going to sit here and air policy positions with you, 9 or 10 days after the election. I believe that the energy security of our nation is effectively the same as our national security. I believe the approach taken by Labor, which is all in with renewables, is reckless, and it's putting us on a position where we will have intermittent energy supplies into the future, which makes it very hard for major industries to continue to produce things here in Australia. So in our regional communities where most of the production occurs, in our regional communities where all the major energy production occurs as well, we're also the same communities that are going to bear the brunt of Labor's reckless approach to renewables. So there's a lot of work to be done there. I mean, you go out in those regional communities and people there are very concerned about clearing of land for more wind turbines, clearing of land for more industrial scale solar farms. They want to see other approaches.
Like nuclear?
Absolutely. So
you think we should use the coalition, so it should stick with nuclear?
Well, my position is the same position as it was before the election, is that we should be doing the work we've intended to do, which was have a 2.5-year critical assessment of the 7 sites and to see what's possible with nuclear in Australia. I mean, it strikes me as more than a little bit odd that the Prime Minister and his entire cabinet are quite happy to put the Australian Navy and submarines powered by nuclear reactors. But now they're saying you can't possibly have nuclear energy in Australia. I mean, 32 countries in the world now have nuclear energy. There's no country in the world with as sophisticated economy as Australia, which is moving down the all-in on renewables, like Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese, and I think it's a reckless approach.
But wouldn't the election have just been a major referendum on nuclear? If you want to get back into power, isn't that one of the policies you should rethink?
Well, I said to you at the outset, I think that all the policies can be considered, but you asked me what my position is. My position is the same as it was before the election. It's the position of our party room that we believe removing the moratorium and doing that critical assessment of those 7 sites over a 2.5-year period is the right approach. In my electorate of Gippsland, my primary vote was basically static from the last election to this one. The community, which was intend to host one of these nuclear power stations at some point in the future, voted that they thought it was a reasonable approach. So, this is a contested area of public policy, of course it is. But the communities where it is likely that any future nuclear power station would be situated, which is on a retiring coal-fired power station site, they weren't as concerned about the issue as perhaps some of the media commentators were.
Your partners, the Liberal Party, are also searching for a new leader. They will need to consider a lot of change potentially in their policy as well. Attracting more women is one of the things that they've talked about. Do you think that the Liberal Party should have gender quotas?
I'm reluctant to ever run a commentary on our coalition partners in terms of they've been through a really rough time in the last 2 electoral cycles. They've lost dozens of seats in the last 2 elections, so they do have some soul searching to do, and they know that. So I'm not going to run a commentary on how they should solve that problem. I think the principle that you point to of getting more female representation in Parliament is entirely an appropriate aim for us. How you do that is always the challenge, whether you go for quotas or some other means of encouraging more women to run for Parliament in the first place. In Victoria and the Nationals, we've been very successful in that regard. We've actively recruited female talent to run for lower house seats, so much so that we have now more women in Parliament out of Victoria for the National Party than we have men. So that's something we've been able to do without quotas. So I think there are ways of doing that, but you've got to be prepared to go out into your community, find your local champions and recruit them and get them, give them the confidence to run for Parliament in the first place. And perhaps we haven't done that as well as we could have in the past.
Are you willing to say who you'd like to see lead the Liberal Party?
You asked the question with trepidation, knowing the answer, I'm sure. No, I won't be running a commentary on Liberal leadership. I wish them well, just as I wished all the combatants, if you like, in our party room today well. And we had 2 candidates for leader, 2 for deputy leader. They all spoke brilliantly. Any one of them could do the jobs they'd applied for in the room. So we're a bit sport for choices in the Nats. The Liberal Party will have a similar difficult choice tomorrow, I'm sure.
Could Jacinta Price have been a leader in the Nats?
Well, there was no case for change. If it goes back to my original comments when we started the interview, that David had run a good campaign, had led us well for 3 years. The results are on the board in terms of the Nats' performance. There was no case for change in the National Party room, and the continuity and the certainty we provide, I think, is going to be good for the coalition going into this next term of Parliament.
Do you think David Littleproud can work with whoever Liberal leader is?
Oh, absolutely. I've known David now for his entire parliamentary career. I got here a little bit before he did. He's proven himself able to work across the political divide, whether it's working with the Labor Party when required to on practical policy for regional areas. But obviously he had a good working relationship with Peter Dutton. I'm sure whomever the Liberal Party chooses tomorrow, the National Party will work to have a constructive relationship. We won't be pushed around. Obviously, we're there to deliver outcomes for our regional communities, and that's our big challenge as Nats, is to make sure that the regional interests are well represented.
And you must feel, well, I'm putting words in your mouth, but do you feel deflated, I guess, about the amount of work that the coalition has to do to get anywhere near winning government again?
Well, I'm an optimist by nature, but I'm also a realist. There's no question this is challenging. But what I do know, having watched the Albanese government up close during this past 3 years, the Albanese government is good at campaigning, but not very good at government itself. So there's opportunities here for us because they were so poor at government that they provided opportunities for us to get close prior to Christmas, and then they out-campaigned us. I think the support for the Albanese government is very soft. I think it's very thin on the ground. In fact, we didn't give them enough reason, the voters enough reason to vote for us. But the bottom line is I don't think the government is a very strong government, really. They've got a large margin, I accept that. But the support on the ground in a very volatile electorate now, people are changing their allegiances in voting patterns more than perhaps any time in recent history. You're seeing a splintering the vote, a fragmentation of the vote. If we get better, if we offer a credible choice, I think we can be very competitive at the next election.
Darren Chester, thank you so much for coming up.
All the best. Thank you.
While the Nationals have locked in their leader, the Liberal Party is still in search of a replacement for Peter Dutton. Deputy Leader Susan Lee and Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor are considered the front-runners. But former Liberal MP Jason Falinski has today endorsed incoming Liberal MP Tim Wilson, who has reclaimed the seat of Goldstein after losing it to Zoe Daniel in 2022. Speaking to Sky, Liberal Senator Holly Hughes has questioned if he's the right person for the job.
I'm just not quite sure turning back up after 3 years out of the parliamentary room is the right thing to come in and say, hey, hand over the leadership. Maybe if he was interested in the deputy leadership, that might be another matter. He did an incredible job prosecuting the franking credits case. Tim is not someone without talent. I'm just not sure turning up after an absence and saying, hey, hand me the leadership's the way to go.
There's still plenty of fallout from the federal election, with several leadership challenges this week. The Liberal Party is set to elect a new opposition leader and deputy tomorrow, with the Greens also in need of a replacement for outgoing leader Adam Bandt, who lost his seat of Melbourne. Joining us for today's political panel is Greens Senator Barbara Pocock and Liberal Senator Dave Sharma. Senator Sharma, I'll start with you. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Two of the three contenders for leadership, Tim Wilson and Jacinta Price, have not been in the party room for the last few years. What did that say, or what does that say about the sort of leadership and talent that you've got coming through at the moment?
Well, I think it suggests we run an open and competitive process, and if you're a member of the Liberal Party room, you're entitled to put your hand forward for leadership positions. Ultimately, you know, the party room will make an assessment about the merits of respective candidates and make a choice, and then I expect we'll all respect that choice and move on from there.
Who should lead your party?
Well, that's a decision for the party room, and I'm not going to indicate my preference or predilection one way or the other on this show, I'm afraid.
There has been some talk about something called the list. The UK Conservatives Party have this pre-vetted list of candidates designed to diversify the party. It's not a quota, but it's something at least that might be able to get more women into the party. Jason Falinski suggested on RN this morning that it's something that the Liberal Party should look at. Do you think they should try?
Look, I'm open to all options and ideas to, you know, broaden the diversity of our parliamentary wing, but also, more importantly, you know, broaden our appeal as a political movement and make sure we're connecting with Australians as they are and where they are today. So, you know, I think all options should be on the table here. I'm keen to, you know, I think we had some great candidates at the last election who represented quite diverse groups within our community, but unfortunately, large numbers of them were not successful in seats where we hoped they might be. But that's something I'm committed to helping us move towards and achieve over time.
Senator Pocock, I'll bring you in. The same question, who should lead the Greens?
Oh, righty. Well, I'd rather be in our party room making this decision than in the party room for the coalition. We've got an amazing group of talented people, many of them women. A lot of experience there. I'm really looking forward to our decision, which will be on Thursday. I won't be telling you what's going on today because I'm not sure yet who is on the table. The media are out there speculating on whose name's going forward, but the great thing about the Greens party room is that there is a lot of talent in there, and we will get behind whoever we elect on the day.
Does the leader of the Greens determine a direction? For example, would the choice of Senator Mehreen Faruqi, for example, show the party is keen to pursue issues around Gaza, given she's been really outspoken on that particular issue?
Well, I'm very confident that the leader, when they're appointed, will be part of the reflection that we do after this election, as we do after every election, with the party room, and consider what the vision is for the period ahead. We took very strong policies on climate and environment, along with social justice and economic justice issues like housing, like getting dental into Medicare to the last election. And I personally was really proud to enunciate those proposals. I feel very strongly that they're the right direction, along with our very strong position on Gaza. And I'm confident that whoever walks out on Thursday as the leader will have the full support of our party room for a vision that is multifaceted, as our party is in terms of the interests we want to pursue. We've got quite a big agenda, and I'm confident we'll be taking up the mantle which the Australian public have given us. They've returned us to the Senate with sole balance of power to do the job of pushing for a progressive policy agenda. That's what our leader will be concentrating on, and that's what we'll all be right behind.
You mentioned housing there. Dave Sharma, I'll come back to you. The Liberal MP Jason Falinski told us this morning that house prices should go down and leaders should be honest about that. Do you think that that is a risk the party should take, telling voters that house prices should go down?
Well, I think what we need to be doing is increasing the supply of housing. I think that's the biggest problem overwhelmingly we face. And you know, over time, if we increase supply, then homes will become more affordable. Now, whether that means that nominal house prices stay flat whilst real incomes increase, or whether there's a small market adjustment, I don't think matters a whole lot. I think what matters is bringing more homes into the supply side of the market.
Barbara Pocock, Max Chandler-Mather has previously said that house prices should drop. Should they?
I never heard Max say that. I certainly heard him say many times that we need to see catch-up in wages a lot to allow people to afford the housing that we have in front of us. What we've had at the moment is a massive deterioration in real incomes in recent years, and this incredible takeoff fed by our tax policy around housing that really needs remediation. So we will continue to prosecute a case for a fairer tax treatment that doesn't put a very wealthy property investor alongside a first home buyer, renter trying to move into home ownership. We need to continue to look at the tax system and make changes there. And we need to see the wages of ordinary Australians catch up with where our housing prices have gone. That may mean a steady there, a slowing down, but we need to make sure wages make this a possibility. And that is not just about wages, but also about the tax system and how that helps those who are locked out at the moment catch up. In a wealthy country like ours, everyone should have a roof over their heads, and it shouldn't be an investment game, it should be a housing supply game.
The Greens were criticised in this term of Parliament for blocking Labor on housing with the help of the Liberal Party in the Senate. So, for example, will you back Labor's 5% deposit policy, Senator Pocock?
Well, I think the mandate is there for that, and we will want to be seeing really significant change on housing supply in particular. The issue that we had with the deposit change is that it's very modest in its effect, and it actually will feed demand. What we need to do is make sure we grow the supply, and that will affect the ability of people to enter the market. That's where we really need the action on supply, and that's why we pushed Labor so hard last time to get that extra $3.5 billion into social and affordable housing. That will continue to be, and every economist agreed with us that that is where the action in our housing crisis needs to be addressed. We need to also look at renters and follow the example of the ACT and look at rent caps for those who are being priced out of their rental into homelessness. Massive challenge in a very wealthy country like ours. We should be able to fix it.
Will you push Labor on rent caps?
I'm sure that will continue to be part of our consideration and a really important issue for the 7 million Australians who are renting. And in my city, Adelaide, where I am today, it is incredibly difficult to find rental property, and it's pushing many people out of housing entirely with growth in homelessness. So we will be working hard on rent. And I heard a lot on pre-poll and during the election about the deep concerns that many people have about the rental market and the runaway rental costs and the difficulties facing so many young people and others as well in our rental market.
I just wanted to turn to issues of the Middle East war. Special Envoy Gillian Segal was asked this morning whether she thought that some of Adam Bandt's, your former Greens leader's commentary on Gaza was anti-Semitic. She said that some of his comments were, which is something that the party rejects. What do you make of that assessment of Mr Bandt?
You're asking me. I listened to that interview and I must admit I was absolutely horrified. Gillian Segal did not offer a single example, because there are none, of Adam Bandt being anti-Semitic, and the journalist did not ask her to provide any examples. It is absolutely repugnant to me and to my party room that we are called racist and anti-Semitic in that way. It is grossly unfair and untrue. It is a lie, as I have directly said, for example, to Senator James McGrath, who has used those words to me in Senate estimates and other committees. It is wrong to say that the Greens are anti-Semitic, and as long as people are saying that, they are distracting us from the very significant challenge of anti-Semitic attacks that are coming from the extreme right. Not so long ago in the streets of Adelaide, we had neo-Nazis walking down our streets calling out anti-Semitic phrases and carrying symbols which are absolutely inappropriate, repugnant to the citizens of this city and our whole country. We need to focus on the anti-Semitic attacks that are there and stop them. And we also need to understand that it doesn't make you anti-Semitic to criticise the genocide, to use the words of Amnesty International, that is proceeding as we sit here in Gaza. You know, yesterday was Mother's Day. We know 40,000 children in Gaza have lost their parents, have been orphaned through this war. We know today children are not getting water or food. This is a concern to us on our TV screens every night. And we can talk about Gaza and take action and try and force the collaboration of the international community to stop that appalling set of events. And it does not make us anti-Semitic. That is a very appalling charge, I thought, this morning by our envoy for anti-Semitism, for combating anti-Semitism, and it is absolutely repugnant to me and to all of us in our party room.
Dave Sharma, I'll bring you in here. The Liberal Party ran particularly hard in Sydney's eastern suburbs, in particular on issues of anti-Semitism. It was a major talking point for all of us before the election was called, less so in the actual campaign. In the end, though, do you think that it is an issue that people actually voted on?
Look, I don't know. I guess I haven't seen any analysis suggesting one way or the other, but I wouldn't phrase this as or pitch this as a political issue or a campaigning issue. I mean, I think our concern throughout was the fact that a particular community in Australia, the Jewish community, was being vilified, harassed, intimidated, and in some extents punished, if you like, for the actions of a foreign state, or people's perceptions of the actions of a foreign state, to which they have some degree of allegiance by sharing faith, or perhaps sharing citizenship, or perhaps having family. Now, my view is, and I think our Liberal Party's view was, we have never allowed that to happen in Australia before, and nor should we have been turning a blind eye to it this time. So, to me, this is an issue that's, is about our ability to live together as a multi-faith, multi-ethnic, diverse society, and respecting each other's fundamental rights and freedoms. It's about the sort of Australia we have. It's not so much an issue for an election or a campaign.
Senator Sharma, do you believe that voters were turned away from the Greens because of rhetoric on the Middle East?
Well, look, I think other people can make up their mind, and I'm sure Barbara's got a view on it. I do think, though, that many people who would have traditionally supported the Greens because of their stance on environmental issues were alienated by what they saw as an extremist or radical position on foreign conflicts. The influence over which Australia has is quite limited.
Senator Pocock, what is your response to that?
You know, when I hear that, I think about Bob Hawke, who spent decades of his life fighting apartheid in South Africa. A circumstance a long way from Australia. When he became Prime Minister, he drew together the international community to impose financial penalties on the South African regime and its apartheid consequences. So we took leadership on an important international issue which had important positive consequences for the people, especially black people of South Africa. We have are now the most progressive government that we have seen in Australia, certainly in my lifetime. Much more opportunity for progressive interaction than there was under the Hawke government. I think many Australians watch what's going on in Gaza and they want our government to stand up with other governments and call it out and use every possible lever to call out crimes which, for example, starving, refusing to let food and water into a zone like Gaza constitutes a war crime. We should be exercising every possible lever as a government, and a recently elected progressive government has the capability to walk in Bob Hawke's footsteps, and I hope we do.
I just want to end, Senator Pocock, on the future of the party. You lost 3 MPs in the lower house. As you say, you still have power in the upper house. Why do you think people rejected the Greens in the lower house this election?
Well, if you look at the actual shift in the votes, it was very small. Our vote held up in the lower house and it held up strongly in the Senate as well. What we saw was a very tight allocation of preferences in those lower house seats. It's very difficult for a small party to get up when there's a major swing to Labor, as we have seen. I think the really big lesson out of this election is that we have had a rejection of the nuclear power possibility that the coalition took forward. We had a rejection of Trumpian politics. We've had a rejection of a move to the right in Australian politics, and that is the challenge for the new parliament. How do we work together? How do we push to make the changes that we know as a wealthy country we can afford to do to make the lives, the homes, the dental care, all the things better, the climate and the environment crisis, to deal with it in the systematic way that Australians have voted for us to do?
You mentioned a rejection of the right. So, Dave Sharma, how does that bode for your leadership direction tomorrow? Do you think that the Liberal Party needs to be looking for a leader that takes it towards the centre?
Well, look, I'd just say, first of all, you know, I'm not, and we're not in denial about the extent of our loss. It sounds like Barbara and the Greens are, but we're truthfully and honestly examining the causes and the prognosis, if you like. I want a leader, look, it's important to me, 2 criteria. 1, a leader who reflects on the size and the magnitude and the distribution of our loss and has some sense of how we go about connecting again with large swathes of Australia who were not interested in supporting us at the last election. I don't doubt that that's a serious challenge. And the other thing I'm keen on is a leader who can ideally bring the party room together and make use of all of our talents and capabilities. Now, you know, I think either leader will be capable of both of those things, but to me it's the sort of the culture and the follow-on. It's what happens the day after the leadership ballot rather than what happens tomorrow that is the most important.
Is either leadership team offering to change any of those things that you've spoken about haven't changed since 2022? You mentioned that review that was done that you said was left on a shelf, basically. Is either Susan Lee or Angus Taylor presenting a platform that will take the party forward in your view?
Oh, look, I think, to be honest, both are. And I think both recognise that we failed to heed and learn some of the lessons of the 2022 result and that we need to be a little more rigorous and exhaustive in our self-examination as a result of this loss. And I have faith that either of those 2 candidates, if they become leader, would do so.
Thank you both so much, Senator Pocock, Green Senator Pocock, and Liberal Senator Dave Sharma. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Isobel. Thanks, Dave.
Turning overseas now, with tensions still simmering between India and Pakistan. Both countries accused each other of violating a ceasefire just hours after it was first announced over the weekend. But over the last 24 hours, the fragile truce has seemed to hold. India first hit Pakistan with missile strikes on May 7 in the wake of a terrorist attack in Indian-administrated Kashmir on April 22, which claimed the lives of 26 civilians and which New Delhi says was orchestrated by Pakistan's government. For its part, Pakistan denies any role in that attack. Earlier, India's High Commissioner Gopal Bagalay spoke to the ABC's Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts about the ceasefire.
Well, High Commissioner, welcome. Can I start with the question of the ceasefire? We've now had a ceasefire for a few days. It was initially looking very shaky. We saw a number of violations, but over the last 12 to 24 hours, things seem a little bit calmer. What's your assessment? I know you're a long way from the front line here in Canberra, but is it your assessment that this ceasefire can now hold?
First of all, good day, Stephen, to you and to your viewers, and thank you for having me here. As for the ceasefire, you are absolutely right. In the first few hours, we had the violation of the ceasefire, which was worked out between the two Director Generals of the military operations of India and Pakistan, when the Pakistan DGMO called our DGMO on Saturday. Unfortunately, Pakistan violated it in the first few hours. But I think in the last few hours, it has held. And we hope that this will continue.
Is there now a cautious hope in New Delhi that we might be able to avoid an escalatory spiral from this point on?
Oh, not only hope, that's our policy, Stephen, because if you have seen, and I'm sure you and your viewers would have followed some of the statements coming out of Delhi, when we targeted specifically the terrorist infrastructure on the 7th of May, we made it very clear that this is, from our side, non-escalatory. We were focused, we were measured, we were very precise, and we also said that we are not targeting any military installations. We not only did not target them, we said this publicly. So non-escalation is what we had said in the beginning, and it dovetails into our priorities. Our priority is development. Our priority is to work for the growth of the people with the partners like Australia and other countries in the world. We are focused on that.
Now, let's go back to first principles. Obviously, India launched these strikes on May 7, and this was in direct response to the horrendous terror attack that we saw on April 22nd in Kashmir. Now, India has maintained that these attacks were effectively orchestrated by the state of Pakistan. Now, the question I've got is, what is the precise evidence that India has substantiating that? Have you shared it yet with partners like Australia, and will you share it publicly at any point?
So can I answer your question, Stephen, at two levels? One is specific to the incident. There are intercepts electronically obtained that link the terrorists to their handlers in Pakistan. In fact, we waited for 14 days for Pakistan to take any action, and then only came May 7th. But in the meantime, we also picked up intelligence that more attacks on India were being planned. Generally speaking, in such cases, there are three types of evidence. One is the intercepts. The other is if we are able to capture a terrorist, which is very rare, then of course it's his testimony, and I will go to that in later part of the conversation. And if they die, during the operations during the terrorist attack that they launched, then there are DNA samples and the things that we recover from them, which often have Pakistani markings on them. From time to time in different terrorist attacks, and there have been, unfortunately, dozens and dozens of them only since 2000. More than 24,000 people have been killed in India as a result of these cross-border terrorist attacks. Only in the last few years, more than 1,000 people have been killed. So we have shared this thing with the international community. You would recall in the case of the horrific Mumbai terrorist attack in 2008, in which even some Australians were killed, we had shared this with the international community.
Australia obviously has a level of deep sympathy. It's aware of this history. As you know, it knows that India has been a victim of terrorist attacks, but it's also deeply worried about the risk of escalation. Now, the government's response here in Australia has been extremely careful. Foreign Minister Penny Wong has simply said that she doesn't want to see an escalation. She wants calm in the region. Unlike some other countries close to India, like France, Australia hasn't yet specifically said that India has a right to defend itself against terrorist attacks in its public statements. Would you like to see slightly stronger language from Australia along those lines?
Let me come to the Pahalgam terrorist attack, because you mentioned some of the things in that context. When the Pahalgam terrorist attack happened on the 22nd, and it was, as you know, an attack not only to kill civilians, tourists who were in Kashmir's tourism paradise. And by the way, 23 million people had visited Kashmir in last year alone. So its tourism was picking up. The idea was, by religiously segregating people and shooting them point blank in front of their families and identifying their religion in the crudest way. I don't want to say on the television how they were identified, but perhaps your viewers might have read it. The idea was to try and have a communal divide in India, to pull down Kashmir's economy, but none of this has happened. Now, coming to Australia, you know, when I heard of Pahalgam and the tourism, you know what came to my mind? Bali. Bali 2002, Bali 2005. Number of Australians had lost their lives over there. As for Pahalgam in 2023, this year, when the attack took place, I think on 23rd April, the Prime Minister, Honorable Anthony Albanese, who was in the midst of a very intense election campaign, you know, it is significant enough for the Prime Minister of Australia to take out time and call Mr. Modi on 23rd, condemn the attack as a terrorist attack in no unequivocal term.
So you believe that calls for restraint, whilst understandable, miss this narrative somehow, or miss that broader strategic...
Every time a terrorist attack happens in India, the focus is marginal. I am sorry to say this, in many areas in the world, the focus is marginal. In fact, at many places, it's not even called a terrorist attack. It is called, and people in India don't understand this, that why those attacks are not called terrorist attacks, whereas some other attacks in the world are called terrorist attacks. They are sometimes called militants, they are sometimes called gun attacks, they are sometimes called incidents. Look, if there is a zero tolerance on terrorism, then there has to be no free pass to any terrorist.
Is it understandable, though? I mean, High Commissioner, as you know, we're talking about two considerable powers, both nuclear armed. I mean, is it not understandable Australia's focus should be on de-escalation?
This is the other false narrative, and this is the other false equivalence, Stephen. By no amount of imagination, no stretch of imagination, you could put India and Pakistan on the same nuclear pedestal for 4 reasons. One, India has a declared policy of no first use of nuclear weapons. Pakistan does not, which means it can use nuclear weapons when it wants. So we are, as it is, very responsible, very restrained. We will not use the nuclear weapons in the first instance. Second, Pakistan occupied those nuclear weapons through clandestine processes, and in that it spawned a network of proliferation of nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction, which has caused, by the way, serious challenges for the closest allies of Australia itself. Third, Pakistan, as I explained, has spawned cross-border terrorism against India under a nuclear shield. Launch a terrorist attack, retrieve to the shield. If India will not take action, but if it takes an action, then cry wolf and say war, and then word will be focused on the war, obviously. So this is obviously, India does not do this. Fourth, I told you Mr. Bhutto's statement, they will eat grass, but may have a bomb of their own. I don't want to say, with all due respect, I don't know what they are eating. But you can see from 1970s where India is and where Pakistan is. So please don't equate India and Pakistan in terms of their having nuclear weapons. We are a very, very responsible nuclear power. Even to these terrorist attacks, which were conducted on us, our response was very measured. We targeted these structures, terrorist infrastructure of Jaish-e-Mohammed, of Lashkar-e-Toiba, which are designated terrorist designated organizations by United States, by US, by Australia itself.
Has Foreign Minister Wong and Minister Jaishankar, have they had a discussion?
I think they have been, if I may say so.
A few discussions?
They are the best of the buddies. And in the last Parliament's term, since Foreign Minister Wong took over, the Senator Wong took office as Foreign Minister, I think they have met 22 times. I won't be surprised if they are on WhatsApp. So I don't come to know of every conversation or every contact between them, but I do know that they have been in touch. Yes, you are right, Stephen.
And just finally, High Commissioner, this is not the most consequential question, but it is worth noting many Australians are probably aware a number of Australian cricket stars have essentially come back to Australia because the IPL, as you know, has been suspended due to the situation. Realistically, are they going to make it back to India? Can the IPL resume in the current moment? It's difficult to see it pushing ahead at this point in time.
It was difficult situation in India. There were obviously difficulties on our western side, and given that situation, I think it was a decision to postpone IPL for some time. I think perhaps a week. But I think that's a decision which the organizers will take. If Pakistan, look, I've told you, I've explained it, I think, that we are not interested in war. We are not interested in escalation. Our priority is development, our priority is economic growth, our priority is regional connectivity, our priority is to work ourselves with partners like Australia and multilaterally to contribute to the global good. We are focused on that very, very much. We are focused on making India a Viksit Bharat by 2047, a developed nation. We don't want these things. But if something happens, if cross-border terrorism is inflicted upon us, if military aggression is inflicted upon us, then of course the government has the duty to defend its citizens, to defend the country. Coming to the IPL, of course, I would also like to see the Australian players back over there, and I'm into that.
High Commissioner, thanks.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and have a good day.
Labor's new ministry will be sworn in at a ceremony before the Governor-General Sam Mostyn tomorrow. And one group that will be working closely with the new ministers is the Insurance Council of Australia. CEO Andrew Hall joins me now. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. What are your thoughts on Matt Canavan's comments this morning saying there's no credible evidence that droughts or floods are getting worse in Australia from an insurance perspective? Is it really tenable to go backwards on net zero targets?
Well, insurance prices risk, and we only have to have a look at insurance payouts to understand what's been happening, not just here in Australia, but globally. In the United States, for example, the 5-year rolling loss rates of insurance have doubled from $64 billion a year a couple of years ago to now more than $140 billion a year over those 5 years. So, look, we are seeing insurance is struggling to deal with two fronts: one, extreme weather events, and two, population growth. We've seen a surge in our population on the east coast of Australia, particularly in high-risk areas. And one of the things we've got to tackle as a country is building more resilient homes and building them in the right places. And if I'd say anything, I would hope that the National Party picks up the work that Perrin Davey was doing on resilient homes and understanding the impact of catastrophes on the built environment. I think it's very important that both sides of politics commit in a bipartisan fashion to making sure Australian homes are built to be durable and insurable into the future.
The Insurance Council worked with the Albanese government in its first term to establish the Disaster Ready Fund. What are some of your priorities with the new ministers during this second term?
Well, the industry has to partner with government to come up with solutions around availability and affordability. Government holds a number of the levers that will be able to help bring downward pressure on premiums. That's everything from land use planning through to building standards and the like. We've worked very closely with the Albanese government in their first term as they set up what's known as the Hazards Insurance Partnership. That has become a globally leading partnership between the insurance industry and the government, where we are now sharing data around our peril risks. I think what that means is for the government moving forward, it now has access to a lot of information about where risks are very high, where they need to invest money, and because of those high risks, premiums are very high. So if we can work with government on building flood levies, home raising, in worst case scenario, buybacks and the like, I think we can start to develop a stronger narrative in this country around our insurability.
And just quickly, 30 seconds or so, the Coalition's doing some soul searching. Would you like to see it abandon the proposal to break up the big insurers as part of that?
Well, many people we've spoken to in the coalition don't support that as a policy. Anyone who does any research into the insurance industry soon discovers that the facts are we need deeper pockets, we need access to more capital. The cost of insuring Australia is a very hefty one. At the moment, we access around $40 billion of reinsurance globally. That's what we need, is access to cheaper capital. If we can get cheaper capital into the Australian marketplace, then insurance becomes more competitive. I'm confident that the new Assistant Treasurer, Daniel Molino, understands this very well, and we look forward to working with him on that.
Thank you so much, Andrew Hall. We've got to go. That's afternoon briefing for today. Stay with us here on ABC News. Joe O'Brien is up next with today's top stories.